What's happening, guys? It's DK Priori and welcome back to another episode of Let's Try Linux. And this week we're taking a look at UBUNTU MATE. So if you remember back to when we covered Ubuntu, we covered the idea of desktop environments, and that's a theme that's been continuing on through the course of this series. And an important feature of any Linux distribution is what desktop environment it comes packaged in. And if you remember, we've mentioned in the past something called Mate, which is that middle ground. I think it was in the Linux Mint episode. I know that was Cinnamon, my bad. But we've mentioned Mate as a desktop environment, which is that middle ground between XFCE, which is like the lightest, and some of the others, which are more resource intensive. So this is Ubuntu, but in the Mate desktop environment. Now you have to download these as standalone distributions. Ubuntu doesn't give you the option of downloading Ubuntu in any other desktop environment other than GNOME or Unity. But community-driven developers have repackaged Ubuntu in a variety of different desktop environments, and this is one of them. This is Mate. So let's head over to the Ubuntu Mate homepage and take a look at what's inside the box. It's a little bit slower than the other distributions we've seen. That's because I've got this one running on 4 gig of RAM. So you'll see that it functions at just a pinch slower, but that wouldn't be indicative of how the OS would function for you if you were to install it properly onto a device. This is just because we're running it in a relatively limited VM. So it's a community developed, as I've said, Ubuntu based operating system that beautifully integrates the Mate desktop. So the idea is that it's meant to be stable, easy to use, with a configurable desktop environment, and apparently it's ideal for those who want the most out of their computers but prefer a traditional desktop metaphor. So what that means is you remember that Ubuntu had its own thing going on. It wasn't your standard desktop. You had your stuff up at the side that you would click on, or you could bring up the full screen App Explorer. Mate takes Ubuntu's sort of system and repackages it into something that's more like Windows, as you can see. So if I click on menu, it brings up the ability to browse the apps in your sort of familiar Windows way. It comes packaged with Firefox, as we've seen time and again from Linux distributions. It comes with the Libreoffice suite. I actually prefer Libreoffice a lot over OpenOffice, so when it comes to my build, I'll be making sure that I've got Libreoffice rather than OpenOffice. OpenOffice is a bit sluggish, and aesthetically I find it a bit old school for my taste. LibreOffice is much more integrated into a modern desktop environment, as you can see, and you can change all of this to be like a dark mode. So I wonder what system settings. Well, let's look how it performs. Control-Alt-T brings up the terminal as it does with Ubuntu. Let's see what performance is like. Pretty good. Pretty good. We'll keep that up for now. And let's look at some system tools. No, that's not what we want. Mate administration, what was that? Mate color selection. What's this? So if we change that, oh, it's a color selector, right? I see. Preferences, here we go. Appearance. So currently we've got this ambient mate, which is this sort of sick, like vomit green and black. I'm going to change that up to black, mate. Which is like a dark theme. But you've got all these to choose from. You can customize as well. So you can pick and choose different features to go into your theme from different preloaded themes here. So if you wanted, like, oh, that's interesting. So there is like a traditional Windows theme that you might be more familiar with. I prefer my themes dark, but I think for this we'll just go with a sort of Windows theme. But you can choose these like Apple looking photos. Oh, that's straight out of XP. Ha! Yeah. So we've got this Windows XP looking OS now, which is much more sort of, you can see it's very obvious from the way it looks that Mate's, when it says in the description that it's meant to offer a more traditional desktop metaphor, you can tell straight away what it's alluding to. It's alluding to the fact that it looks and functions a lot more like Windows, except the bottom here is not used. You know, your taskbar's up in the top corner. But I'm going to see if we can change that. So we can pick a solid color for our taskbar down here and up there, but we can change it to the bottom. Get rid of that panel. Ah, let's see. I wonder if cancel that. Or if we could properties. No. So we can have this sort of navigation for our different workspaces. It's by default it's down at the bottom, but I've swapped it over just a few clicks of a button, so the menu comes up at the bottom now like in Windows, and the workspace menu comes up at the side. What else have we got going on here? So that's all our lock options about this computer. So you can see we've got 4 gig of RAM available, and I only installed a 12 gig hard drive. But even so, that's actually a really light desktop installation, because I'm pretty sure I installed a 12 gig hard drive, or I allocated 12 gigabytes of disk space for Mate. and I've still got 11.9 available, so that's really light. It's much lighter than Ubuntu. So all this stuff here, CPU's like chugging along nice and slow, nice and efficiently. Let's see what else we've got on the home page. So it's optimized for Raspberry Pi and the GPD Pocket. Interesting. Let's have a look at features. Software Boutique. So it comes pre-installed with a customized set of apps that the developers think are most useful, i.e. like LibreOffice and stuff. Familiar layouts. So you can customize everything. Oh, here we go. Panel. Mate tweak. Panel. Select a panel layout. Oh, wow, okay. So, Cupertino introduces a dock like on a Mac, and that's really quite speedy actually. That's interesting. I like that a lot. That's a really good feature. Let's look at Mutiny. Mutiny follows Ubuntu's sort of traditional down the side look. All these changes are starting to netbook. What does this do? Netbook gives you just this stuff along the top, which in a virtual machine that's not going to work so well, because as you see, as soon as I go to the top, my workstation toolbar pops up. Pantheon is another dock style one with the app finder up at the top as well. Redmond. Ooh, there we go. That's what I was looking to do. So Redmond's your very traditional Windows style. Everything's at the bottom. That kind of stuff. And what's traditional? Traditional is back up at the top and a taskbar at the bottom. I tell you what, in keeping with Windows, let's go with Redmond. Close those down. Close that down. Close that down. So as you can see, we've got this really customizable. I mean, it's not KDE Plasma levels of customization, which we'll come to see in a later episode, but there's a lot of options. So if you were, say, coming from Mac wanting to switch to Linux but didn't quite fancy elementary, you wanted something a bit lighter, Ubuntu Mate might be the way to go, because you could just go into Mate tweak, and change up to a different desktop layout and have your dock at the bottom. And there's two options to pick from. There's a sort of green. I'm not a fan of the green that comes with Mate, to be honest with you, but that's just me. Or you can go for transparent. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for Ubuntu Mate. I'm a fan of Ubuntu anyway. It was my first experience with Linux, as I'm sure is the case for many people. And this brings across the speed and efficiency of Ubuntu. One thing we haven't done, this brings across the speed and efficiency of Ubuntu with, I guess, the same repositories and stuff. Resource temporarily unavailable. Unable to acquire the D-package front-end lock. Huh, that's interesting. Well, anyway, that's a problem I'll have to fix in my own time. But like I said, there's a lot to be said for Ubuntu Mate. It's very customizable. It's very lightweight. You know, you can customize it through these presets how you want it. If you want it more Windows, if you want it more Ubuntu, or if you want it more Mac, the options are there for you. So yeah, it runs well. Aesthetically, it's not my bag. It's a bit old school looking for me. You know, I doubt, even if I tweaked through the settings, you know, pinpoint, I doubt I'd be able to achieve the clean and modern desktop that I'm looking for on my device. But in terms of performance, it's all there. There's a few decent customization options, which have given me food for thought. I quite like the idea of a dock, and I'm just wondering if there's a way to integrate a dock with a more traditional Windows style. More traditional Windows style task finder, and I think this had it. Panel Redmond, I think it was Pantheon, was it? Pantheon had your dock at the bottom and your app, your task manager sort of thing at the top, which I quite liked. It's not going to work on a virtual machine, obviously, because, like I said, my workstation toolbar will come up, but I quite like the idea of combining both a dock for my favourite apps and a more traditional menu for when I want to find things that I don't use very often. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. I've quite enjoyed Ubuntu Mate. Like I say, it's definitely given me food for thought. So yeah, I'll definitely be taking something from this operating system, this distribution, sorry, into my own custom build. But for now, I've been DK Priori. Peace.